Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Simply Monique radio show. I'm your host, Monique, and today, ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest. You all know all my guests are special, but this time we're doing something a little bit different on the show today. We have author Tammy Walsham. She's from London, UK, which is, we reach in the UK, you guys. We reach all over the world, but this is special to have an actual guest literally from there. This individual is a part of a huge project coordinated by Miss Heather Robinson. She's part of an anthology where educators come together and they are impacting the world through their gifts, talents, time, providing strategies and visions for the DEI revolution in education and training. Welcome to the show, Miss Tammy.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you for joining us today. So before we dive into the book and everything, let our audience know a little bit about you.
Okay, so I was born in London. I came to the U.S. when I was 8 years old, and I was living in California until about 2 years ago, where I moved to D.C. I've always wanted to teach. I've wanted to teach since I was 5 years old. So for me, it's something I'm extremely passionate about. Something I'm very dedicated to. Would probably do no other occupation other than teaching. I do look at teaching in, I feel, a different way than somebody who's come into it later on, just because this is something that I've always wanted to do and probably will never do anything else. And so it's not a lot of times that you know somebody that the things they wanted to do when they were younger, they're doing that as an adult. But I did go to college for 2 master's degrees, and I'm currently in a doctorate program focused on educational leadership. So every degree has been education-based, and I've been in education. This is now my 24th year. So I've worked with from infants to high school students.
Awesome. So you kind of covered a lot of territory, and I love the fact that you knew, like, since you were 5 years old, that you wanted to become an educator, you wanted to make a difference in the world as a child. And so now you've been doing it, and you've actually literally started making that impact on our children in today's society from the time they are 4 or 5 years old to 17, 18 years old in high school, which is the most important years of their life, where their minds can still be shaped and molded and influenced in a positive manner as well as negative manner. But you knew early on what you wanted to do. I think
yes,
that is.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, and I think that is amazing. A lot of young people now, some know what they want to do, some do not know what they want to do in life. So having you a part of that system, an education system, is important because you understood early and you can kind of help them navigate that process. So a few questions I have for you on today. The first one I'd like to ask you, Tammy, is how has being an author influenced you? You shifted somewhat careers, per se, by being an author, participating in this particular book. So how has being an author influenced you, if at all?
So I think being an author just kind of really allows you to really just look at your complete experience as an educator and see how it can be applied to what you're writing about. And in this case, we're talking about DEI. And I do work with special education students. So in that aspect, there's a lot when it comes to DEI that I have to deal with. But I've also worked in schools where I've been one of 2 Black teachers or even the only Black teacher in the school. So I feel like my experience has allowed me to be an author that's able to see certain perspectives that some may not be able to. Because even in D.C., I noticed a lot of the students, they have a lot of teachers that are teachers of color, which is great. You know, to be fortunate enough to have that is a great opportunity. But in places like California, certain places, I was in Sacramento, that wasn't something that students had the opportunity to have. So I've had where I had a student who her grandmother told me that I was her granddaughter's first Black teacher. And so I'm able to relate to the kids in different ways. So I think that being an author just really just allowed me to really just think about everything that I've done, everything that I've experienced, and just really seeing how I've been able to just put that in the book to really be able to allow people to see my perspective when it comes to the topic that the book is focused on.
Understandable. Your statement made me remember a teacher I had when I was in junior high school, and she decided to go against the grain. She was an African American teacher, a black teacher. I've had many of black teachers, but this one here I recall standing out more because she went against the grain. She decided to teach us African American literature instead of focusing on what was required, which in turn allowed us to learn about different authors, different writers, if you will, than the typical ones of the Langston Hughes. We knew about them because school teaches you that. We learned about different people and different authors, what they did, different time frames, and I love that about her. I don't even know if she's still living or not, because she was much older. So, but I remember her and her being able to kind of shape my love for literature. So, as I grew older, I got my first love. I like to share with people is that it was poetry. I got introduced to poetry first, and scratch that. I fell in love with poetry as I became a teenager, but I always loved literature and reading books and things of that nature. So having a teacher and an educator like yourself in place to show that difference, to bring that dynamic to the classroom, I think is essential. And like you mentioned, in California, you had a grandmother speak to you about her granddaughter having you as their first African American teacher, their first black teacher, versus in other states, if you live in Georgia, South Carolina, Florida, the southern states, you will see black teachers present there in schools, depending on the area that you're in. I can recall transitioning from one high school to the other. I was called like a soul, called a sellout, all these different things there because I switched schools. However, I had less black teachers at this particular school than I had at the old school, and it had to do with the area that I lived in, and also the schooling, the way the schools, the lines they have there, which school you can go to, and there. I also noticed that too, and maybe you can attest to this as far as the area of the district that you're in, how what's actually being taught, the curriculum that's being taught, the services that's provided, because some schools actually get more supplies, get more tools, resources to actually equip the students, for them to go from grade to grade and not be just pushed through.
Right.
So, go ahead.
Yeah, and I was going to say, it's very interesting because that is a very true statement that there are some schools and districts where they are able to get more resources, more even just different types of teachers to be able to really just give the students what they need. And then you have some that don't necessarily have that. So even when I was in California, I was the BSU advisor. And so it's interesting because in D.C., when I say BSU, some people don't know what that stands for, but it stands for the Black Student Union. And so because I was one of two black teachers, there were a lot of students that didn't necessarily feel like they had a place that they felt like they belonged because none of the educators really looked like them. And so, as a person of color, there's different experiences that you may have than somebody who is not a person of color. And so being able to be in a group that allows you to be able to talk about those things was really impactful. So I had a BSU that had almost 40 students in it, and I did that for about 2 years. And so one of the things I will say about the school I was working was when it came to anything with the BSU, they were very much about whatever I needed, whatever I wanted to do, they were on board about it. So even though I was one of two black teachers, I was never made to feel like I was one of two black teachers.
That's good.
And I know there's some schools that's not necessarily the case where, they do make you feel like you stand out in that way. But thankfully, I was just blessed enough to not have to be in that type of environment.
I think that's crucial for the educator and the student to be in a safe environment and a positive environment. And speaking of environments, I want to say, because you all collaborated on this anthology book, right? And since by being a teacher, you happen to work with other people, would you say participating in this book helped you to work better? Like, has it influenced you to work better, be a better team player? Because it takes a lot to write with different people because everyone doesn't think the same or have the same style of writing.
So I think for me, it just allowed me to, because one of the things with me is I'm very much a team player at work. I'm very positive. And I try to be that way because I always take into account that I don't know what people are dealing with, what they're going through. And so they may be experiencing things that I'm not aware of. So I try to be the positive person in the space. I always try to be a team player, and I also try to really just take constructive criticism as much as possible. And I take it as the person that's giving it is really trying to help with what they're saying rather than harm. So I'm very much about gravitating towards people that I feel I can be a team player with. And with this anthology, I really feel, and it was interesting because, none of us knew each other before the anthology, but even in the creation of it, we've all really just been able to work together, and we really seem to get along really well. And so I think it's because we all have the same mindset of understanding what this book means, the power that this book has, and what it just means as far as being impactful for so many different people in so many different spaces.
You answered my next two questions with that, with your statement. So that was awesome. That was awesome. So your particular role in this anthology, and I want to actually let our listeners know the actual title of the anthology. It is the Educators Rise, Voices of Change, Volume 1. Educators Rise, Voices of Change, Volume 1. So your participation, your role in the creation of this anthology, how pivotal do you think that is?
I think it's extremely pivotal. I think part of when we're talking about DEI, a lot of times that's more focused on the workplace and, making people feel inclusive and equality and diversity in the workplace. But a lot of times we don't look at it in any other space. And so this anthology is so important because of the fact that it really just focuses on the fact that in education, DEI is so significant, it's so impactful, and it's so needed. And so to have things that are taken away is going to be impactful and not in the best ways. And so it's about really just taking the time to understand exactly what DEI means in the educational platform, but also understanding that even not the educational platform, but just in general, there's so many ways that we see diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so helping to understand that this reaches not just the workforce, but all other areas that people don't even take the time to think about, because I think some people will say, well, DEI doesn't impact me. It doesn't matter to me. But what you see is that it actually does. So it's not a workplace issue. It's an education issue. It's a household issue. It's a family issue. It's just all around us. And we really need to see how is DEI something that impacts all areas and not just one. So
a question. So in writing this book, right, and sharing your contribution to the book, did you have any challenges, any barriers when it comes to writing and being able to effectively communicate your message on how DEI impacted you, how you wanted to convey the message to people? Because I don't want you to give away what you said in the book, but just let us know what they need. Yeah, because I like people to read the book. You can give a little bit of teaser, but you don't want to give away too much information.
Right. I get what you're saying. I wouldn't necessarily say I had any barriers. I think when it comes to DEI, you really have to look at what does DEI touch, and how does that, as an educator, how does that relate as an educator? How is that conveyed as an educator? And so I wouldn't say I had any barriers, but it was more of me just really taking the time to think about my educational journey and how has it been impactful in that entire time, because this is 24 years. So, that's a long time to have to deal with DEI. So really just looking at my educational career as a whole and seeing where does everything fall when it comes to what I was going to be writing, what I was going to be adding to the book.
So would you say, so some people think that think of DEI in a negative space, right? And so they don't view it as something positive, as something that's actually making a difference for children, making a difference for educators, just making a difference, period. Some people viewed it as you mentioned earlier in the workplace, that it was, if you were Black, if you were Haitian, if you were Jamaican, if you were Asian, whatever the case would be, that it was mainly solely for you, and it's like a check in the box off the list for as far as employers are concerned. Like, hey, we hired this percentage of people, we hired that percentage of people, we trained them, promoted X, Y, Z. When in terms where the angle that you're coming from is not about ethnicity or race or anything of that nature. It's about providing the tools, so to speak, so that the students, the parents, the faculty, everyone involved are actually equipped to be able to be successful in getting their education, be able to, in getting education, to be able to understand the curriculum that's provided, being able to. I heard somebody say recently, it was a teacher. She said I think she was teaching middle school or high schoolers, and she said the children that she had, they had like a third grade reading level, but they were in high school. And so she was like, she said, parents, you all are coming up here and complaining and fussing, but your child's reading level is subpar. And so it makes me think about our children being pushed through the system, you know?
Right, right.
If they're being, if they're being pushed through the system. And so I know people who were pushed through the system because they were good students. They didn't misbehave, right? And so they were favored by the teacher, but they could not understand. They could not understand anything. They had all these issues, and so when it comes to arithmetic, I'll say that specifically because now math is a different math for these kids. However, they learn, and even with grammar and English, I learned recently that they were not taught. You remember how we learned pronouns and nouns and verbs and adjectives and all those different things there, right? That this person was in high school, however, there were certain things they were not taught. Like they stopped teaching certain things. And when they get in high school, it's like, I never heard of this. I never knew this. So it makes you wonder, like, okay, what's being taken out of the schools, right, as far as the curriculum that they're being taught, and what's being taught at home, right, from the parents. Are you reinforcing what they learn at school? Are you taking the time out to sit with your child to figure out what they're doing in school? Because algebra, geometry, trigonometry, and what we may have learned then and what they're learning now is not being taught the same. They got the tablets and all this different stuff there. I remember substitute teaching, and I had to learn a new way to teach algebra. So I was like, what is this?
Yep.
I was like, what?
Yeah, that is
and how
so true.
I was like, how did you get that answer? Okay, what?
Yeah.
Okay, the kids that teach, I'm like, I didn't learn it that way. So it's like you have to wrap your mind around this stuff and this new methodologies to teach people. So I do understand where you were coming from, and just the weight and the importance of I know at first I was like, I ain't really too keen and fond of this stuff here, but the more I'm talking to you all, I'm getting a different insight on it, which I think is needed, right? Because it's always been the workplace. However, when it comes to education system, I had a different perspective. I've always been an advocate for education, but speaking to you all, it gives me a little bit more information and clarity on the DEI and how it impacts the education system and, all those involved in that arena. So these things I wanted to ask you, too, because I know you mentioned some things earlier there. How do you feel like once people read this book and they got it in their hands, how do you feel like it will begin to shape the way educators do business and the way DEI has been implemented and removed, if you will?
So the hope is that it gives people a better understanding of what DEI is. I think that part of the issue is that people that may look at it negatively look at it that way because they don't fully understand it. And so sometimes people are not willing to do the research to find out what something is. Sometimes people just go off of what they hear rather than really just looking into something themselves to know exactly what something is to get a better understanding of it. So the hope is that this book really just opens people's eyes to what DEI is, how it is impactful when it comes to education, not just teachers, but the students and the parents as well, and really helping them to understand exactly what we as teachers do and how impactful it is with the students. Because I think sometimes some parents, because they're not in the classroom, they don't necessarily understand everything that we do. And not just the parents, but a lot of times when you are not the teacher in the classroom, you don't fully understand what it is that teachers do and what it is that we bring to these students in order to help them to be successful and access those academics. So I think the great thing about this book is it's really going to help to open people's eyes, give people a better understanding so that they can really understand that DEI is something positive, something that's impactful in all the best ways, and definitely something that we don't want to lose we want to continue to have it as long as we absolutely can. Getting rid of DEI, or even taking away some of DEI, if that's what ends up happening, even understanding taking away a small part of it is going to be impactful in ways that we don't need it to be.
Okay, so is there a solution? Like they'll say certain parts are taken. Is there a solution? Have you thought about any ideas, or have you all thought of any ways to solve perhaps a particular problem or problems right now? What is implemented outside this book? You as an educator, have you all had any ideas? Like, how can we fix this? What can we do if this is happening? What is the solution now? What's the fix now?
So I think the thing with having a solution is that when it comes to giving people information, they have to be in the space to be receptive to the information they're getting. And some people are not in that space. And so in order to have that solution, there needs to be discussion. And so some people can be closed-minded. Some people may not necessarily want to have that discussion. And so as far as solutions, I think it's more, because that's the thing with DEI, we as educators are meeting that need. And so with DEI, I think when it comes to a solution, it's more about understanding what DEI is in order to understand what the solution is. So in order for that to happen, people have to be open to really taking a better understanding of it and knowing exactly what it is, because you can't find a solution if you don't understand what something is. If you don't understand what something is, you wouldn't know what the solution would be. So people have to really be able to open their minds and be able to be more receptive to getting that, and not being so just focused on what they think they're under. There you go, closed-minded, and thinking that, well, I don't want to see a different way. Because when you're not willing to see a different way, then you're not even willing to even see if there is a solution to make something better. So I think the solution, just the beginning of it, is about people really being more open-minded to being able to find a solution. Because once again, if you don't see there's a problem, then you don't see there's a solution.
I like that quote. If you don't see the problem, you don't see it as a solution. I like that quote. I like that. And I'm not going to say your quote, but I definitely like it. I do. But I do like it. I like to take notes. I'm a note taker, so some things I want to recap on that you shared. Just something personal was that you knew you wanted to be a teacher since you was 5 years old, since you were a child. So you already knew that. So you already knew that this is what you wanted to be. I knew I wanted to be a nurse growing up. I did attempt to be a nurse. I ended up doing something different in healthcare, but I made an effort. It just didn't work out for me because the way hospitals smells, I do not like them. But nevertheless, they are an important thing we have, but I mean the smell, just not the things I like. But it's important to have a safe space and creating a safe space for your child to learn, having a safe space to even to be able to work in an environment that's positive and not negative. Being able to take constructive criticism, be receptive, and have a discussion. Sometimes we don't know because we don't ask. The Bible says us to ask, right? Seek and knock. Ask and seek. So if we ask, we'll have it. If we seek, we'll find it. If we knock, the doors can be open to us. So we have to ask, first, seek, and knock, right? And so what you suggested to our listeners is to have a safe space, create a safe space for your child, and even teachers, educators, create a safe space for the students to learn. And also, they have an issue, they feel comfortable enough to come talk to you about it, and they have that safe space so that they can achieve their academic goals, even middle school, high school, elementary, because that's so important, even for our college students. I want to encourage those who listen. If you have a college son or daughter, right, who's in this environment, if they're struggling in that class, right, and they're struggling in that class, if it's too crowded, too many people in there, perhaps, have them restructure their schedule, have them restructure what classes they're taking. Don't be overloaded. You have to take 4 classes at a time, 6 classes at a time. You may need to take 1 or 2 classes at a time. Kind of evaluate what's necessary there, because they could be overwhelmed. And because they're overwhelmed and the classroom is too big, or the information is too much, they can't grasp it, have to pay attention to that, even at the early age. So that they can have that safe environment like you spoke on. And they can be receptive, because if you're overwhelmed, you're not understanding what the teacher's saying or what the professor is saying out of their mouth. You don't know what's going on. And so if they don't know what's going on, they're going to flunk the class. You're going to be upset as a parent because you're spending tuition money and time. And like, wait a minute,
right?
College isn't cheap. So it's little things I think that we can prevent, from happening, if we pay attention to that. And being able to have a discussion, like you stated, Tammy, have a discussion. Talk about it with your peers. Talk about it with your coworkers. Talk to your children to see, hey, what did you learn in school today? What are you struggling with? And I think if parents and teachers can communicate effectively, we won't have so many kids that's falling behind. We won't have so many kids that's being pushed through the system. And also, we won't have so many teachers quitting because they're frustrated and stressed. But that's a whole other subject right there.
Yeah.
Are there any last-minute nuggets you want to share with our people?
One of the things that I pride myself on as an educator is that I do every day when I'm in class, we do a quote of the day. And so that's our social-emotional learning that we do. And so pretty much it's just a time to take to allow the students to kind of decompress when they've come into the classroom, because I say all the time that we don't know what people are coming in with. And so, I mean, I've had a parent where she was just so angry. And so I kind of just allowed her to just say what she needed to say. And then I was able to talk to her, because one of the things I always take into account is that I don't know what this person dealt with before they got to me. I don't know what they dealt with at the school before me. I don't know what they dealt with the staff before me. I don't know what they dealt with other teachers before me. So, and even with the students. So I always take that into account, and I think everybody should just take that into account when you are interacting with people, is that you don't know what this person has dealt with before they got to you. So sometimes they're coming in with things that they are bringing in from what they've dealt with before. So just sometimes we have to give people grace and just understand that what they're saying or doing is not a reflection of who you are. This may be a reflection of something that they've dealt with. So sometimes sometimes we need to allow people to be able to just breathe a little bit and then be able to show them that I'm different from what you've dealt with before, that you may not have felt like you were heard before, but I'm here to make you feel like you can be heard. And that way you can feel like we can move forward in a positive direction. I feel like keeping that mindset allows me to be able to reach parents and students in a way that makes them want to be able to have conversations with me, do well in the class. Because like I said, I don't know what you dealt with before you got to me, but my job is to make you feel like whatever you dealt with before you got to me is going to be different.
Yes. I love that environment that you create. And I'm like, man, if I'm not at school for a long time, but nevertheless, I love the fact that you do that. And kind of, it reminded me of a different teacher I had. I think I believe she's still living. I found her several years ago, but I remember her to this day because she made that environment for me. That you spoke of. She didn't have a call to the day, but she made a safe, fun learning environment for me. And so I met her probably about 8, 9 years old, this particular teacher. And I even featured her in my very first book because she inspired me just that much. She kept in touch with me until I graduated from high school. I met her in elementary school, and when I finished high school, she stayed in touch with me up until that point there, and we sort of lost touch for years. But she would always send me poems and different cards because she encouraged me to write. She helped me discover I had a gift for writing, and so she made it possible for me to use that gift even more. And as you said, how you set the atmosphere, and like you said, you don't know what the other students, before they got to you, what they experienced prior to. And so she made that environment safe for me to learn. And I promise you, even in college, I always excelled in literature. I excelled in that. But she planted that seed early on, just like how you're doing with your students now, and how you set the atmosphere, you set the stage for them to know what is happening and what is happening so they can learn. And when they go on to the next grade level, they'll remember you, whether they have you again the second time around, but they always remember you, Miss Tammy and Miss Walsham, who's taught me and created this environment for me so I can learn and I can become somebody. I am someone. So I appreciate you and I applaud you for that.
Thank you.
You are welcome. So let our listeners know, because that time went by so quickly, right? It went by so quickly, like, man, let our listeners know how they can get in touch with you, And even let's say if you have any tutorial services that you may offer outside the regular 9 to 5, 7 to 4 area, any services you may provide to them regarding education, and in the book as well.
So I don't have any services right now. I have a lot of different things going on.
Okay.
So I'm just in general. Like I said, I'm in a doctorate program, and then I'm a CASA, and then of course I'm teaching, and then I lead Bible study on Mondays and Wednesdays and something on Sundays. So I have so many different things, and I think
your plate is full.
Yeah, it is, and I think I had to kind of just take a step back because I gravitate towards anything that allows me to be impactful, and then what I was doing was taking on too much. So I think sometimes even if we want to do that, that's great. We have to take a step back and say, don't overload yourself because then it'll be too much. But I'm on Facebook as Tammy Walsham, and I'm also on Instagram, First Lady Tammy 916. So those are the two different ways that I can be contacted. And then, of course, when the book comes out, I can also be contacted that way. So,
yes, definitely. You have your plate full. And being a CASA, that's a lot of work. So kudos. I'm glad you passed that course, that process. It's definitely a lot of work. So you definitely have a plate full, but you're doing, I believe, what the Lord called you to do, and purposeful about that, knowing what Jeremiah 29:11 says, that you're standing on that. And that is definitely happening for you, the plans that God has for you, that you're walking in it and fulfilling the purpose. So again, this has been a pleasure for me having you on the show. I'm so grateful for that.
I'm so happy. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, that is all for today. You all stay up, be blessed, and peace.